From obscurity to the top of his division, this man sure has come a long way. However, it won't mean much if he can't defeat his longtime rival. These are the reasons why Beneil Dariush must beat Charles Oliveira to gain respect from UFC fans. You may be thinking, why does he have to defeat Oliveira? He's on a great win streak. He's been in the game for years. Surely his career isn't over if he loses to Oliveira. That's technically true. I'm sure Dariush can fight other opponents if he loses, but let's be honest. He can kiss his chances at a title shot goodbye if he fails to defeat Oliveira. And if you know Dariush, you know this guy is dying for a shot at the belt. Most can agree that he does deserve it, but these days, it just isn't enough to deserve a shot. As Dana White says, you've got to earn it. You're probably thinking, isn't an 8-fight win streak over some of the biggest names in the division enough? Sadly, these days, it just isn't. If you want to fight for the title in one of the most stacked divisions, you've got to stand out. You've got to be someone the fans want to see. That's why it's so crucial that Dariush defeats Oliveira. A win over Do Bronx removes all doubt that he's at the top of the division. Hardcore fans, analysts, and fighters all agree that Dariush is one of the best in the division. It's just the average fan that doesn't yet support him. You can't really blame them. Although he has been fighting for over a decade and been in the UFC for just as long, he remains relatively unknown. There are a few reasons for this. So, let's get into them. Dariush is known as the dark horse of the division. We've seen many of these characters in the UFC over the years. Every division has some absolute elite fighters that never seem to get the attention they deserve. You've had Jared Cannonier in the middleweight division, Ray Borg at flyweight. Some even consider Tony Ferguson a dark horse, as he was on a crazy win streak but never got a shot at gold. These are some of the best. But due to a lack of fan favor, they never get their shot at the top. However, sometimes these dark horses do get their chance to shine, and their whole career trajectory is changed. Just look at Aljamain Sterling. Fans, media, and other fighters despised him for the most part. Some called him a coward. Some questioned his heart. No one thought he'd ever become the champ. But that all changed when he took out Petr Yan, proving all doubters wrong and securing his championship status. I think we've got a similar situation here with Dariush and Oliveira. Dariush, although skilled and has accolades for days, just doesn't have the respect of the fans. Justified or not, it is what it is. It's partly due to bad luck and partly due to poor decisions from Dariush himself. And maybe the UFC itself can share some of the blame for not promoting him enough. When we say bad luck, we really mean bad luck. This man could have had a title shot ages ago if things had gone a little bit differently. For one, he amassed his 8-fight win streak in the years 2018 to 2022. Although that is impressive in a division as tough as lightweight, Dariush's biggest wins are over Tony Ferguson and Drew Dober. Both were legitimate contenders. But he beat a past-his-prime Ferguson, and Dober wasn't a big name back then. Most fans would see that record and think, okay, it's impressive, but it doesn't earn him a shot at the belt. Why is he not fighting tougher guys? The thing is, he's been scheduled to fight tougher guys. In fact, he's been set to fight the toughest guys in the whole division. For one, Oliveira and Dariush have been set to fight multiple times in the past, but every time, Oliveira was forced out due to injuries. The problem is that since Oliveira has been the champ and defeated a lot tougher competition, fans always side with the more well-known guy. So that leaves Dariush in a tricky position. If Dariush had gotten his chance against Oliveira, he could already be the champ or at least have fought for the belt. What makes the story of Dariush and Oliveira even more interesting is that they both started their title runs in 2018. They were both up-and-coming stars, but due to different circumstances, Oliveira would get his chance and become champion, but Dariush would fall short and remain a relatively unknown contender. Things would have been much different for both fighters if their first scheduled fights had happened. To make things even more intriguing, Islam Makhachev, who would eventually defeat Oliveira for the belt, was also scheduled to fight Dariush previously. Some experts, such as Anthony Smith, think that Dariush actually posed a bigger threat to Islam than Oliveira or maybe anyone else in the division. Can you imagine how much more respected Dariush could be if any of those fights had happened? If he had won against either man, I don't think we'd be having this conversation. But they didn't. Right now, Dariush is in a position where he has to defeat Oliveira, at least if he wants the respect from the fans. But another reason he remains relatively unknown is that this man may not actually care about what the fans think. In a sport where the biggest drama, good or bad, does wonders for their careers, you'd assume that every fighter would go down that road. Not Dariush, though. He's a true martial artist. He refuses to trash talk or call out other fighters. The trend that started with Conor McGregor and Ronda Rousey, which has now taken over the UFC, with rankings being skipped and fights being made purely due to beef, the traditional martial artists out there are slowly being forgotten. Dariush says this himself. In fact, he believes that this is the very reason the UFC isn't pushing him. He says, "I don't know if it's because I speak about my faith or I'm not very confrontational. You'll never see me involved in stuff like that. I think that's the reason you don't see me getting pushed so much." You've got to admit, it's pretty sad, right? A man who sticks to his morals, talks about his faith, and avoids unnecessary conflict gets left behind. Back in the day, you had the likes of Georges St-Pierre and Anderson Silva, who were universally respected and adored purely for their fights. These days, winning just isn't enough. Time and time again, we see fighters with long win streaks who never seem to earn the respect of fans. But it's just the way things are now. Fighters that don't adapt get left behind. Although Dariush has an impressive resume, numerous jiu-jitsu accomplishments, and multiple performances of the night bonuses, his calm demeanor and sometimes anticlimactic fights have meant that fans have forgotten about him. Dana White has often voiced his support for Dariush in getting a title shot. He even said that publicly, but revealed that Joe Rogan actually took him to one side and told him not to do it. Why could Joe Rogan have a problem with Dariush fighting for the title? Well, for the same reason that everyone else does. The lightweight division has some serious stars. You've got Dustin Poirier, Justin Gaethje, Conor McGregor, and Michael Chandler, to name a few. The truth is, fans would rather see guys like this fight for the belt. Joe Rogan agrees. And although Dana White believes Dariush deserves better, ultimately, the fight that people want to see are the fights that get made. Dustin Poirier was asked whether or not he would fight Dariush. He admitted that it made sense, but he just wasn't up for it. He said he only wants big and fun fights, basically saying that although Dariush deserves a big fight against him, and despite thinking he is a good fighter who Dustin respects, he just can't get excited about fighting him. I think it's starting to make sense. Dariush is a great fighter, but lacks the charisma and charm that are so essential for fighters these days. He also lacks impressive wins over big names. So that's exactly why Beneil Dariush must beat Charles Oliveira to gain the respect from UFC fans.